All right, News Herald Sports Editor Paul Schenkel here with sports writer Justin Epley breaking down some of this weekend in football for you. We'll start right here in Burke County at the high school level. Assuming that nothing happens, which we know can happen by now with what we've seen so far this season, but assuming everything goes according to plan, Justin, we'll have 4 games this week involving Burke County teams this weekend. I should say East Burke already played early part of the week. Give us kind of a notebook point. What are we looking for in each of those 4 games?
We'll start with Freedom hosting Highbright in the Northwestern 3A, 4A conference. I think we saw what Freedom can be last time out. You know, they had a bye last week, but last time out against Central Cabarrus with a big win. My question is, how many carries is B.G. Hampton going to get? We saw him go for 324 yards and 4 touchdowns on just 16 carries in that Central Cabarrus win. So his touches have been kind of inconsistent throughout the season. I know he's very important to their defensive line, playing that defensive tackle position. He's a force for them on that side of the ball as well. But I think you got to keep feeding him to continue the kind of offensive success they had last time out. We've seen him score points in other ways, but I think he's the main guy you need to be focusing on, giving more carries as the season goes along.
Sure. And my point for that game, I will say which team gains confidence early. Those are both 2 very young football teams, and it can lead to some wild fluctuations. The last 3 conference matchups that those teams have had have been decided by 50-plus points. Freedom winning the first 2 and Highbright winning the last one. We're dating back to the old Northwestern 3A, 4A in 2014 and 13, 14, and 15 there. But we don't, or 14, 15, and 16, I should say. We don't anticipate that kind of matchup at all. Both teams won by 42-19, identical margins in their last games out, and kind of a tale of the last decade. Freedom started that last decade, world beaters, 6 straight 10-win seasons. Highbright ended it with a state title among other really deep playoff runs. So, but going back to this game in particular, which team can gain confidence? So that's going to go a long way to me in that one. Justin, let's switch over to the other side of Morganton. Patton going to Cherryville on Friday night.
Well, we just saw Patton pick up its first win of the season last weekend on homecoming night, and you know, that was a big game for them. That passing game, Brandon Clark hits Waylon Rutherford 3 times for touchdowns, and they come out of there with a big win. So does that translate to a non-conference trip Cherryville this week? You know, that's a late addition to their schedule due to COVID protocols and other such things that have shifted so many of our games around. So do they continue what they were able to find last Friday on offense as they make that trip down there tonight with a team that they've never played before? So these opponents don't know a ton about each other. So will Patton be able to do some of the same things they did against Madison last week against Cherryville? That's my big question.
And you read my mind. That's my thing too. Can Patton keep its passing game clicking? You saw last week for the first time all season some serious connections in the passing game. Waylon Rutherford gives Brandon Clark a big athletic option out there. Get him the ball. Move the ball through the air. Make it easier on your ground game. Let's stick with Friday night, and maybe the biggest game of Friday night as it relates to conference picture, at least at this point, what we already know, because Freedom and Highbright starting conference play against each other, so we don't know necessarily how those teams will stack up in the NWC this year, but we know Drawn's 2-0, we know Mitchell's 2-0, big Western Highlands 1A, 2A showdown at Mitchell Friday night.
Yeah, that is a big one, like you said. This is when we find out what does this new 1A, 2A conference that we have joined with Drawn this season, what does it actually look like? Not just at 1 and 2, the way it's been in the past when it was just strictly more of a mountain conference. But now that Drawn has come up there, are they in the mix for those first or second spots? Or, you know, with a big loss at Mitchell, perhaps are they just the number 3? Mm-hmm. If they can go up there and show that they're good enough to hang with Mitchell, a team that is one of the powerhouses of 1A, as Drawn steps down to 1A this year, then that'll go a long way toward their conference championship hopes, obviously, but also giving them a good indication of what they could potentially do in the 1A state playoffs once we get there.
Yeah, and my question, kind of a double-sided question in that one is, can the Drawn offense keep up for 4 quarters? We saw a lapse last week against Avery. Can't have one of those against a Mitchell team that has been scoring points in bunches. I guess part B to that would be, can the Drawn defense set any kind of a tone? And obviously, you're not going to shut Mitchell out. You're probably not going to keep Mitchell to 2 or 3 touchdowns. But can the defense at least get a couple stops, get its offense back? And again, can Drawn's offense stay clicking, stay in tune, stay focused for 4 quarters, be able to score in what appears to be a shootout.
Yeah, Mitchell team that scored 63 a couple weeks ago, so we know how they can put points on the board.
Yeah, and then Saturday at noon, East Burke hosts Newton Conover. Give us something to look for there.
Well, East Burke finally emerged from its month-long COVID absence on Tuesday with a Catawba Valley 2A conference game against Maiden. Obviously, Maiden, probably our front runner in that conference, the one we expect to win it. So that may not be the best indicator of where East Burke fits into that league this year. Playing the Red Devils, a team that's maybe a little bit down on performance from where they've been, for the past decade or so. And East Burke now with a little bit of the rust knocked off, we might begin to see more of where they fit in. And we know that East Burke can run the ball with Blaine Fulbright and Carter Crump and those guys, but can they keep that going and maybe add a little bit of the passing dynamic to their game as they go along to try to compete with some of these traditionally good athletic schools that are in that conference?
Yep. And my question for that game will be, can East Burke bounce back on a quick turnaround, 5 days? You've had a month and a day where you're not playing football, and then all of a sudden you got 2 games, one Tuesday, one Saturday at noon. So really 2 games in like the span of 4.5 days. Can you, at 16 to 18 years old, you're not worried about physically can you bounce back, but can you get mentally prepared for the challenge of another game and another conference game that quickly? Let's go to around the state and some college football now. I'm going to break down 4 games, and we're going to switch over to Justin. He's going to talk some pro football this week and some regional games. Louisiana Tech at NC State. I will start there because that is our highest ranked team. The Wolfpack coming in at number 23 this week in the poll. And my question or kind of storyline there will be, is there any way that we're talking upset alert 2 straight weeks with the Wolfpack? We know obviously great win over Clemson last weekend, but it's against the Louisiana Tech team Saturday night at home, ACC Network, that is a scary Louisiana Tech team. Every game that team has been in has been decided by 1 touchdown or fewer. So if you're looking at that point spread, which is right now at 19.5, I'm not telling you to go out and bet, but if you're betting, I am betting Louisiana Tech to cover that spread. The Pack may very well win that game, and it helps being at home for sure. But I don't know about that 19.5. The first game of the season, I should say, Louisiana Tech leads Mississippi State 34-14, is blowing them out. Mississippi State rallies late and wins by a point. One of those close games we've been talking about. That same Mississippi State team turns around and beats NC State 24-10. You can't go by comparative scores in college football. There's too many variables with matchups. But Louisiana Tech, a team that certainly looks dangerous and that the Wolfpack can't sleep on this weekend for sure. Sticking in the ACC, Wake Forest entertaining Louisville. It's a Demon Deacons team that looks to start 5-0. Wake Forest ranked number 24 this week in the poll, and Sam Hartman and Dave Clawson and company have things rolling there. A lot of people are talking about some of the super senior heavy teams in the ACC this year, and Wake Forest maybe is still a little bit under the radar, even at 4-0 and even ranked this week. Ton of super seniors on that team, ton of experience, and it's a Wake team that really has high aspirations. And if you look at their schedule going forward, if they can win this one, which will be a test against Scott Satterfield and company, I think, and Louisville, who's 3-1 at this point, if they can win this one, they could really be looking at a good 8 or 9 game start to this season. Sticking in the ACC, North Carolina hosts Duke. It's a Tar Heel team that got blasted last week at Georgia Tech, and the bad Jekyll and Hyde, the bad side of that showed up last week in Atlanta. But Carolina's been a totally different team at home, 59 points in both home games. You've got to think really ticked off Sam Howell and company come out and want to lay it to one of their big rivals this week. Flip side of the coin, Duke is 3-1, but has already lost to Charlotte. We've seen them do some good things on offense. If Gunnar Holberg and company can keep the ball moving down the field, that certainly is going to help the Blue Devils. I think what they've got to do in this game is establish the run. They've got to keep Carolina's offense off the field for large chunks of time. Carolina, a team that's just a rhythm-based offense. Once they get rolling, they can put points up in bunches. So can Duke not let Carolina's offense on the field any more than is possible? And then the last game we'll break down for you, Georgia State at App State. That's the return of Sean Elliott, longtime Appalachian State assistant coach, to Boone. Georgia State nearly knocked off Auburn last week. Led that game by 12 points late before Auburn rallied with 3 consecutive touchdowns down the stretch. Certainly an App State team, or a Georgia State team that App State cannot take lightly in Sun Belt Conference play this week. In addition to that game, Georgia State played Carolina tough for a half at least before Carolina kind of ran away early in the season. But App State has also played Power 5 team tough, played, gave Miami everything they wanted, and it certainly looks like a Mountaineers team that, not that last year was down by most sort of group of 5 school standards, but it certainly looks like a Mountaineer team that resembles more of those Sun Belt Conference title teams, but this one will go a long way towards that. Let's switch over to NFL. Justin's going to talk about Carolina, Dallas. We're going to talk about Washington, Atlanta being another semi-regional game, and then we'll talk about the return of an absolute NFL icon. And, of course, we're talking about Andy Reid to Philadelphia there.
Right.
No, actually, we're talking about Tom Brady to New England there. Yeah, a little bit more of an icon.
Yeah, a little bit more. So we said starting with Panthers and Cowboys, right?
Yes.
So a couple of teams that one we might have expected to play good defense and one that we definitely didn't based off of last year. Panthers trying to fit that offense around, and Sam Darnold have done a pretty good job of that so far. Schedule's been not the toughest schedule they could have played, but still to be 3-0 at this point. 3-0 is 3-0, so you got to roll with that till you see otherwise. But that defense is really where it has started for them, and they've invested so much of those draft picks and free agent spending in defense in the past few years. Mm-hmm. And we saw an injury to the rookie cornerback J.C. Horn during their game Thursday night, which they won over Houston Texans, but still got a lot of playmakers on that side of the ball. And so does Dallas now, with Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator over there. They have completely turned it around from where they were last year when they couldn't stop anybody. And we saw them do a good job against the Philadelphia Eagles on Monday Night Football and come out with a big home win. So those two defenses squaring off, look maybe not completely even, maybe give Carolina even a tad bit of an edge. But the offensive side is where that one will be decided. And I think Dallas is a little bit better on offense right now with Dak Prescott coming back and looking pretty healthy, and then moving the ball both through the air and on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Washington facing Atlanta.
And it's a Washington team that's got to figure out, are we going to be a contender this year or are we not? That defense that we expected so much from coming into this season has really kind of been a letdown for them. Most recent example of that was in that loss to Buffalo on Sunday, where they just got blown out. We know the offense is a work in progress because they lost Ryan Fitzpatrick in the season opener, trying to make things work with Taylor Heineke till he can get back, or if Heineke can run with that job and keep it. But the defense led by edge rusher Chase Young has not been what I expected it to be, at least, and I think that is where they've got to improve. As crazy as that would have sounded a few weeks ago to say, they can't get off the field on third down. The good news to me is you got an Atlanta team coming in that is a prime get right opportunity for that defense. An Atlanta team that isn't moving the ball the best, isn't scoring a ton of points most weeks. So this is an opportunity for Washington to get back on the right side of things as they look to maybe not win the NFC East this year, but are you going to be in that number 7 wild card seat contention with an extra playoff team again this year?
Mm-hmm. And Bucs Patriots, both teams looking to bounce back off a loss. Tom Brady, 20 years in New England, finally comes back to face Bill Belichick and company this week. What are we looking for there?
I think one of the things we've learned over that 20-year span is that you don't want to play Tom Brady after a loss. And we've seen that time and again. That applied when he was with the Patriots, but I think it also applies with the Buccaneers now. Sure, it also applied to Bill Belichick, but I just don't think that team in New England is where it needs to be right now to contend with a Tampa Bay offense that can do a lot of good things to you. It's a defense that's not as good as it was last year, and they've had some injuries on that side of the ball, but I think you got to roll with Tom Brady and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Rob Gronkowski and that bunch in this one.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, we look forward to breaking down some more football as this season goes along. Hope you'll check back in with us then. Enjoy the games this weekend.